some reason I'm
shit, and
still
nobody
able
was
to
really the wiser. So obviously there
function.
are risks with this
It's
data
not a
set too.
big
For
deal.
instance, the
I mean,
potential
I
for
will be
offensive
able to
content.
function
Yeah, no
anyway, but
shit,
like
bro. It's the
able
fucking
to
whole
like
database. What do
functioning
you
basically.
expect? But anyways, ladies and gentlemen,
When I get
obviously,
tired enough, I
real
just go to
LLMs that
bed,
people use
but
on a
it's
day-to-day
not the
basis, like
time yet.
ChatGPT or
It's
whatever
probably
the
soon.
hell you want to use, need all the data they can imagine. Okay, every single bit of data from human beings, and to do that, they have to scrape the internet. Now, in a lot of cases, Reddit is one of the biggest sources for information on the internet. And in some cases, they've actually made deals with Google to the tune of $60 million. Around 2 years ago, I talked about
What
it,
is
where they would
chat?
basically license
Oh,
out
people are
your
chained.
user generated content. Because let's be goddamn honest here, 100% of Reddit is, from what I understand, user generated content, okay? It's just people writing posts and a whole bunch of moderators having a whole power trip for a whole $0 a year salary, okay? But anyways, Reddit decides, okay, we're just gonna license out this information to places like Google because let's be honest here. When we use Google, we type in our entire like search term, and then we do space Reddit because generally speaking, the humans on Reddit probably give better answers than the dog shit search results of Google on a day-to-day basis. So, anyways, Reddit
I
makes
might
a
agree.
bunch of money doing this, and I think they want to make like
People
$20 billion
hate
doing this
Reddit a
shit.
lot, but I
Well,
think
what
it
about
might
people who are
have
like,
better
fuck
results
Reddit,
than Google.
I'm gonna not pay for it, I'm gonna get this information for free? Well, Reddit doesn't take too kindly to that, and they basically concocted a pretty impressive, I guess you could say, a sting operation, and it actually worked. So, anyways, this is a 54-page lawsuit between Reddit and three companies. So, SERP API, Oxy Labs, AWM Proxy, well, actually four companies, and
Yeah.
Perplexity AI. You know the guys who made the Comet browser? Yeah, all these companies are just fucking suing each other. So let's actually read this and talk about what's going on. So Reddit brings this action to stop the industrial scale unlawful circumvention of data protections by a group of bad actors who will stop at nothing to get their hands on valuable, and it is
Yeah.
valuable, copyrighted content on Reddit. So again, it's your user generated shit that Reddit wants to keep safe. Remember, Reddit doesn't give a fuck about you, okay? They don't give a fuck about the user. What they give a fuck about is using the information you post and selling that on their terms to Google or whatever fucking organization they want, okay? They do not care about you. I'm not here to pitch Reddit as this altruistic good guy. Really, they're trying to keep their nuts safe. That's what's going on. So they mentioned these three companies, Oxy Labs, AWM, and SERP API, which again they say it's a Lithuanian data scraper as Oxy Labs
I
is.
didn't know people
AWM is
use
a former
Reddit
Russian
as a
botnet.
search engine,
What the fuck? And then SERP API is this
but I
Texas
do
company
think it's
that
actually
publicly
good
advertises its
answers.
shady circumvention tactics. So to show you what SERP API is, you can actually purchase this for yourself. And you know when I showed you a local LLM that I had, instead of using like SeerXNG, like your local like search engine, you can purchase access to SERP API and have it scrape information for you. So for instance, I looked up Halo Remake and it looked up, so this is what the page looks like to you. Now what SERP API does
The
is it
thing is, I should
grabs
feel good
information
about
about
myself, because
everything
even
you
when
see,
I
and
was in my
LLMs will take this
lowest
information
in the
and
streak,
use it to,
I was still top,
feed back
barely, but
information to
I
the
was
user,
still
right?
top
So the
50%.
allegation here is not that they're opening up Reddit, for instance, right? It's the fact that the search engines, for instance, SERP API, will do the same thing that I talked about, where again you type in Halo Remake and Reddit. Now, of course, obviously, what
Oh,
they
nice.
look for over here is mostly the snippet sections,
I
right?
thought he
Or
was
for
doing
instance,
it,
they
but
want to look at, again,
whatever.
just people talking
Maybe
about
it
this,
doesn't
whatever they
really
can
matter
scrape
to me.
from Google
But yeah, he
server,
passed
Google's
to me and
API,
failed to
instead of
shoot.
directly going into Reddit. And sometimes,
But
if
I
you're
got the
looking
shot
at Reddit over
anyways,
here, you
so
might get the answer
it's
through like
better
the Gemini prompt
if
up
you have
top,
the
or you might just
chance.
get the answer in
Don't
this
rely
little
on your
section. And
teammate.
that is
But if
one of the things that was being
no, if
scraped.
you have a
And
chance
of
to
course,
not
other
rely on
companies
your
like
teammate,
Oxy Labs will
like
kind of
oh
do
wait, what
this.
am I
SERP
saying?
API, for instance, wouldn't even be something that
It's
Google would
better to
approve of in your
score
terms
than
and
to
conditions.
rely on your
But
teammate. But
that's
if
the
your
grit. These
teammate
companies scrape the
is
internet and basically package it in
gonna
a nice
help
way
the
for all
chances
these
of
AI
the
companies
then
and just
maybe
other
it's a
people in
good
general,
idea.
right? Like
But
that's
that didn't
the whole
actually.
operation. When it
Could
came
have
to
went into the
AWM
globe.
proxy, for instance,
He
where they
actually
alleged
just
that it was this apparent like
yeah.
actual like Russian botnet, that was more specifically related to the Gloop Tiba botnet, which this is all the way back in 2021, 2022. But
Yeah.
basically, at one point in December 2021, Google was suing two
I'm
Russians that
surprised
were
that the
apparently
people in
alleged
Israel
to be
that want
behind this
all
botnet.
people
And
getting
literally the
government.
same day, AWM
But it's
Proxy,
not
which was
that bad
14
of
years old and
I
apparently
don't know.
rented hacked
They're
PCs to
they're
cyber criminals,
basically
also
all
went
not innocent,
offline.
but I'm still
And it was
surprised
also
that it's
the
that high.
understanding from
The
many people in
amount
the
of
security
people.
game that Glup Teba and AWM Proxy was kind of one and the same. So what was really the scam
But
over
they're
here?
all
Why were
bad people,
proxies
basically,
used?
and
So basically,
and
the
I say
allegation is
basically
first
because
they were evading
they're
Reddit's own
basically they're
anti-circumvention
not
measures,
everyone,
and
but
second, they were circumventing
basically
Google's
a
controls by
crazy
scraping
amount
the
of
Reddit
people
content
because they're
directly
uninformed
from
and
Google's search
their
results. So
education
in a very
tells
real
them
sense, these
otherwise.
defendants are similar to would-be bank robbers who
Their
knowing they
education
cannot get
tells
into the
them to
bank
kill
vault,
thieves.
break into the armored truck carrying the cash instead. Bro, they made it sound like the beginning of fucking Heat, bro. When they're like, goddamn, hitting the armored
Nice.
van and shit.
Now we actually have a chance.
I cannot, dude. Man, some days I wish I could be a judge reading this shit. I would lose my mind in a courtroom, dude. So anyways, defendant Perplexity AI, an AI company that is more akin to a North Korean hacker, is a willing customer of at least one of its co-defendants and will apparently do anything to get the Reddit data it desperately needs to fuel its answer engine. So again, that is basically anything other than paying Reddit directly. Because why the fuck would they? Why would you pay a company $60 million if you could just get it for fucking free, you know, or get it at a much discounted rate, right? Which is obviously what Perplexity would allegedly want to do. Okay, I'm not saying that these are all allegations. But again, remember,
To be
these
honest, now
companies
that I'm
scrape
thinking of
information
it,
everywhere. If they
it's
started
like I'm
paying
in a
for the
good
training
place
data,
right
I
now.
mean, bro, they would go under easily. Okay, could you imagine how
Let me
how in the
exit
red
the menu and
financially would
then
you be
search
if
for
you
Mac.
actually had to pay
Oh
people
no,
to
it's
use
already
their
switching,
information
but I
and
want to do
build these LLMs? I mean, could you imagine the fun that would go towards like people like artists,
37
people who
per,
capture
yeah,
their
it's
shit
very
straight,
close
people who are
actually.
actually putting this stuff together? I mean, it would be
Oh no,
crazy. So basically,
41%.
the allegation too was that SERP API, Oxy
That's
Labs, and AWM Proxy
worse,
would
but
just
still
scrape the
pretty
data
good.
from Google. And the way that they would scrape the
Almost
data
off
is they would mask their
40%.
identities, hide their locations, basically acting as proxies. It would just be like VPNs, right? They would mask themselves, send every request, and make it look like a real human being was sending the request. So you wouldn't trip like Google's CAPTCHAs, Google's like anti-scraping. This was a pretty interesting operation. And they said basically in the span of like 2 weeks, without authorization, 3 billion search page results containing Reddit texts, URLs, images, and videos were basically grabbed. Like, that's insane. So now, what's interesting about it too is that apparently Reddit had caught Perplexity red-handed, actually, and this is where it gets super duper interesting. So they used the bank robbery analogy and said that Reddit placed a marked bill, and apparently Perplexity just grabbed it. So down over here at page 2741 here, they were saying Perplexity or its agents are working with one or more of SERP API yada 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 to circumvent the technological measures protecting Reddit content and scraping the information. So to confirm the hypothesis, Reddit made this test post. The equivalent of a digital marked bill that could only be basically Perplexity popped the die pack, okay? The die pack went off. That could only be crawled by Google's search engine and was not otherwise accessible anywhere on the internet, okay? So again, they made this post that I guess you couldn't access via Reddit. You could only access it if you were looking through Google's search engine, okay? So within hours, queries to Perplexity's answer engines produced the contents of that test post. The only way that Perplexity could have obtained that Reddit content and then used it in its answer engine is if it and or its co-defendants scraped Google SERPs for the Reddit content, and Perplexity then quickly threw that data into its answer engine, okay? Now, if you want to see that post for yourself, you probably could, according to Reddit, dig up through SERP API and a lot of these like organizations and probably find it yourself. But it shows you that, with the volume of searches, they're just constantly hitting Reddit to grab everything that they can, obviously, in their allegation, to feed into their AI model. So it's insane, too, because they kind of say that the practices led Cloudflare CEO to say that Perplexity's practices better resemble North Korean hackers than the practices of a reputable AI company, bro. Jesus Christ. I mean, there's some pretty inflammatory language over here, and honestly, I'm having so much fun reading it, and it's just funny to see like all these big tech companies who really don't give a shit about your privacy, my privacy, or really even our safety, get into these fights with each other and use these languages to like make it look like they're morally above the other. You know what I mean? Reddit doesn't give a shit about your information. They only give a shit if they can monetize your information in their own AI or with their actual official dealings. Now, ultimately, how the fuck does Perplexity respond to this? Well, not just through a lawyer, I imagine. No, they actually went right on Reddit. And they posted here too. So right here they say, "Dear Redditors, you might read that Perplexity was named in a lawsuit filed by Reddit this morning. We know companies usually dodge questions during lawsuits, but we'd rather be upfront. Perplexity believes this is a sad example of what happens when public data becomes a big part of public companies' business models. Selling access to training data is an increasingly important revenue stream for Reddit, especially now that model makers are cutting back on deals with Reddit or walking away completely.
Bro, they're both
Why
better
is
than
Perplexity?
us.
Our guess, it's not a show of force in Reddit's training data negotiations with Google and OpenAI. Perplexity doesn't train foundation models. Here's where we push back. Reddit told the press we ignored them when we asked about licensing. Untrue. Whenever anyone asks us about content licensing, we explain that Perplexity, as an application layer company, does not train AI models on content. Never has. So it's impossible for us to sign a license agreement to do so. A year ago, after explaining this, Reddit insisted we pay anyways, despite lawfully accessing Reddit data. Bowing to strong-arm tactics just isn't how we do business.
I feel like I'm
What does
getting
Perplexity
carried.
actually do with Reddit content? We summarize Reddit discussions and we cite Reddit threads in answers. Just like people share links to posts here all the time. Perplexity invented citations in AI for two reasons. So that you can verify the accuracy of AI answers, and so you can follow the citation to learn more about and expand the journey of curiosity. So what they're saying is basically, bro, we're not training our stuff off your data. We're just using the models we have to summarize your information for you. Which honestly, like, again, what the fuck with this company? Like, here's the thing. You can believe them at their word, but I don't necessarily believe any of these companies at their word either, okay? There's definitely a benefit for them, in my opinion, that, for them to grab all this information for a purpose behind the scenes is important, right? Like, it's more, I don't just trust them on the fact that they don't train their information, but at least they're being open about this. At least they're saying this publicly for people to record down the road. So what people use it for, right? When they visit Reddit to read your content, it's because they want to read it, and they read more than they would have from a Google search. Reddit changed its mind this week on whether they want Perplexity.
Bro, that song reminds me of me going
learning.
IKEA.
I love how they make it sound like it's so fucking altruistic. Like, guys, our users only want to learn, okay? Our users only want to learn, okay? What's wrong with learning? Guys, they just want the world to be more educated. In any case, we ain't going to be extorted, and we won't help Reddit extort Google, even if there are huge complaints. Perplexity will play fair, but we won't cave. And I actually don't even trust the guys over at Reddit. Again, Reddit wants to make it sound like they give a fuck about the open internet and they give a shit about you, the user, when in reality, you're nothing more than like a money generator for these guys when they can just use your data.
To be honest,
anyway. So
you can't
the
assume
thing about
that.
all of this is, look, there are.
I mean, you
I
can
don't
assume
think,
that,
like
but I'm not
where,
sure.
Like, both people are bad.
I
Okay,
think
both
this is
sides I don't like.
completely an opinion.
I could just kind of laugh at the situation in of itself. Both sides are trying to be this like morally grandstanding over the other, but in reality, they're both just dipshit tech companies that really, at the end of the day,
that was
care about
important to
hyper-monetization.
come back.
I don't really believe Perplexity when they say that their ultimate goal is for people's curiosity to be sort of like tamed because they're so titillated with the thirst of knowledge. And I don't necessarily believe Reddit gives a shit
They
about
don't.
the open internet, or Reddit even cares about the user privacy and safety. Now, I want to play devil's advocate over here and just kind of try to understand who's more in the right. And I really do think that, I think maybe it might be Perplexity that's in the right, and Reddit kind of is being a little bit of a scumbag here. So if what Perplexity is saying is pretty true, if you actually go to their page, I think what they're saying is if you open up sort of like Perplexity's AI and ask them to summarize this, basically it will look at the actual thread over here and it will make a quick summary of, again, what the hell is going on over here, right? Like the actual, so we open up the Perplexity response and here's the actual summarization of it.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
if what they're saying is true, right? If what Perplexity is saying is true, is that they're not just grabbing stuff to train, but they're just scraping the internet and like regurgitating that information through their models, then it's not so different than, for example, if I set up this local LLM, and so for instance, I have web search capabilities that I connected through my own local search engine. If I just send a message, it'll actually start searching the web. So it'll use CRXNG and scrape the internet for, again, the results. So give it a second. It's loading up the model. It'll just search for it. So you can see right over here, it's got some search prompts. It actually searched 3 websites. In fact, those websites were also Reddit in this situation. Again, this is a local AI that I'm using, right? And then it'll produce the actual response for me. And yeah, you can see that, like the Comet browser that I was using, which was Perplexity's AI, my own local AI is doing the same thing, albeit obviously slower and probably of lesser quality compared to whatever AI system that they use. So I guess there's not really a training that's going on over here. It's just literally, this is what Perplexity is saying. Like, we're not actually training your AI. We're just like grabbing information from your website and then regurgitating it in this manner. Now, ultimately, at the end, Reddit kind of did expose, to an extent, how these sites kind of operate, even if it's not plainly out in the open, even if they are rejected, right? Like, what Reddit is basically saying is that whenever you go to any website and they have this robots.txt file, which is kind of a explanation to a scraper. Remember, web scraping has existed for a long time, right? Like, this is how Google kind of started out. It scraped links, connected to links, and built the internet search engine that we use today. So again, what Reddit is kind of saying is that, hey, instead of coming to us and paying us to access our users' data, these guys are just going to these third parties and scraping their information. And obviously, according to Perplexity, they're saying they're not even training models.
I didn't mean to do that.
They're kind of using real-time data searches and scrapes to, you know, feed into existing models, I imagine, and then use those models to give back conversational-esque answers, right? Or just that kind of stuff in general. Again, I don't know how much of that I really believe, but to be real with you, I've noticed that, you know, in just literally the last few days, you know, as this sort of push has evolved, especially when it comes to a lot of these AI tools and their screen recording practices. You know, the other day, and this is a side note, Microsoft's Gaming Copilot had this feature on, apparently by default, right? There was a bunch of people testing on ResetEra that the Gaming Copilot apparently uses model training on text, and that was enabled by default. So basically, it never tells you, like, Microsoft wasn't telling you during the installation that the screenshots that it was collecting or gathering from your computer were actually being used to train things. So one user found this out because they were working on an unreleased game while they actually had an NDA agreement. So then when they realized that Copilot was transmitting the text data from the screenshot without asking for permission, since the game was technically under NDA, they might have actually violated it by unknowingly sending information to Microsoft. Now, of course, obviously, I think even if you're not looking at this from an NDA perspective, just training people on users' information is already just a shady sign anyways, right? Gathering all this information and using it is not just a privacy nightmare, but when you go back to things like Perplexity and you look at like how they interact with Reddit, just the cost, the amount of internet bandwidth spent on basically creating slightly better search engines, or I guess the conversational search that people are into, you know, we really have to constantly ask ourselves, is the juice worth the fucking squeeze, right? It's crazy, right? It's crazy to see all these companies are basically at each other's throats. And this lawsuit is one of many lawsuits that are happening between some of the biggest companies in the world. Like, you got like fucking Disney going after like Midjourney. You've got Anthropic and fucking Meta apparently pirating the goddamn entirety of human like books and then using it to train their engines and sort of like getting cases, you know, dealt one way or the other. It is an insane minefield to go in. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Reddit did, you know, expose a huge scam. They did expose a pretty bad bank robbery that happened, in their words. And ultimately, they are kind of right, okay? They were right. But I don't think Reddit's an altruistic company. I don't think they give a shit about you. Honestly, from the sidelines watching, it's just looking at two douchebags going at each other. Now, who is the lesser of the douchebags in this situation? I think given Reddit's history, you know, I may have to give it to, like, I may just have to give it to Perplexity. They might be the slightly better company because Reddit is just a goddamn shit minefield to go into. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the company, the girls are fighting.
Another one in.
The girls are fighting. And they're exposing each other. And all we can do is sit back and scream into the void at how unnecessary this shit really is at the end of the day. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.
Today, I'm finally going to be opening up about the psychological and domestic abuse, stalking and harassment, sexual assault, and threats of blackmail that Ms. Kiff has done towards me, and some of these issues which are still ongoing. For the entirety of this year, I have attempted to separate myself from him and not talk about him at all, and not talk about this issue, and just not make it a public thing. I always tried my best to keep this to myself. But like I said, I feel like it's gone to the point, which I'll explain later, that I feel like it just has to be done. And I have always believed in
No, I'm gonna
not
sleep. Whatever.
condemning people
So I
or
should
starting
go
drama
After
online.
this.
So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be asking, why am I doing this and why now?
I'm literally
And
like
I would like
almost
to explain
falling
that
asleep.
before I get started, so that people understand what prompted me to do this today, and that it's not just on a whim or something like that. Okay, so, like I said, I took a lot of notes, so forgive me if I just end up reading off my notes.
Oh.
The first and probably most severe reason is that one of the rules that I set for myself a long time ago about withholding this information was that if I ever felt
No, what did I
like
do?
somebody else was in danger of being hurt, I would then make myself speak about it. And 2 weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago now, I was informed by 3 separate people, one of whom was present for said incident, that he had done something similar to something that he had done to me. And, someone
Yeah,
in
I'm
LA at the end
gonna
of
sleep. That
September.
was a very bad
And
way
this
to
person is
end
not
it.
a streamer or content creator, but obviously that does not matter.
Bye, guys.
And because of this,